tear the whole thing out. Every last foot of it. Vanessa Pike shouted from the other side of my fence, while the excavator bucket hung over the berm like an axe waiting to fall. She called it an ugly dirt wall. I called it the only reason 46 expensive homes below me had never taken water, and the sky rolling in from the Gulf did not care what either of us called it. I stood on my back porch holding a chipped coffee mug and watched Vanessa smile as the first bucket bit into the soil, because sometimes the smartest thing a man can do is let an arrogant person finish the mistake they worked so hard to begin. My name is Calvin Mercer. I was 61 years old when this happened, and I had spent 29 years designing flood control systems for the Tennessee Valley Authority before retiring to a small piece of land outside Laurel Ridge, Mississippi. I knew how water moved to clay, limestone, pine roots, roadbeds, culverts, and neighborhoods built by developers who believed elevation maps were more of a suggestion than a warning. Water is honest that way. It never lies, never brags, never joins a committee. It just follows gravity and exposes whoever ignored it. My wife, Nora, used to say I trusted contour lines more than people, which was not entirely fair, but it was not entirely wrong either. Nora died 5 years before the trouble started. Ovarian cancer, quick and merciless. And before she passed, she made me promise I would build the little farmhouse we had sketched on napkins during road trips. She wanted a deep porch, a yellow kitchen, and enough room behind the house for peach trees. I bought 6 acres on Briar Hollow Road the following spring, close enough to my son Eli Jackson that he could visit without turning it into a federal expedition, and far enough from town that the nights still sounded like tree frogs instead of traffic. The property came with an old diversion ridge built by a cattle farmer in the late 90s. Nothing fancy, just packed earth shaped along the natural slope, but the bones of it were good. I improved it the way some retired men restore old trucks, except my hobby involved drainage calculations, soil compaction tests, 2 grass-lined swales, a rock spillway, and nearly 500 feet of buried pipe. I filed every permit with Jasper County, stamped the plans with my professional engineer license, and added an emergency overflow channel wide enough to carry storm runoff around the lower valley. The system could redirect close to 12 acre-feet of water during a major rain event, which is a polite engineering way of saying enough water to fill several football fields knee-deep. Below my land sat Magnolia Trace, a gated subdivision built in 2020, with stone mailboxes, identical black roofs, and a clubhouse that looked like a plantation wedding venue designed by a software program. Their lowest cul-de-sac had been built directly across an old seasonal drainage path. My berm kept that drainage path from remembering what it used to be. Nobody thanked me because nobody knew, and honestly, I preferred it that way. Good infrastructure is like a good bass player. When it is doing its job, most people do not notice it exists. Vanessa Pike noticed. 3 weeks after I moved into the farmhouse, her pearl-white Cadillac Escalade stopped across the mouth of my driveway, blocking it at an angle that suggested she had never once considered the possibility of another person needing to leave. She stepped out wearing white sneakers, cream-colored slacks, and a smile that had all the warmth of a bank foreclosure notice. She carried a leather binder against her chest. "Mr. Mercer," she said, "I am Vanessa Pike, president of the Magnolia Trace Property Association, and I am here to help you understand our community expectations." I looked past her at the sign near my mailbox that clearly read Private Drive, then back at her. "That is kind of you," I said, "but I do not live in your community." Her smile held, though I could see the muscles around it tighten. "Everyone in this valley is part of our community," she said. That sounded friendly until you noticed she had used the word part the way an emperor uses the word province. I explained that my parcel predated Magnolia Trace by nearly 50 years and had never been included in its development plat. I even offered to show her the county deed. She waved one hand, dismissing the idea as if deeds were old-fashioned little opinions. "Our board has reviewed the boundary, Mr. Mercer, and your earth structure does not meet our visual standards." "Earth structure," I repeated. "The berm." "Yes, the mound. It obstructs the scenic view from several premium homes." I looked downhill. Vanessa's house sat on the upper corner of the cul-de-sac with a wall of kitchen windows facing my property. Suddenly, the mystery was not much of a mystery. The berm did not threaten the community. It interrupted her view of the sunset. I told her I would be happy to discuss drainage signs with her board, but I would not be removing a permitted flood control structure from private land. She gave me a patient little nod, the kind adults give children before taking away the scissors. We will see what the county says. 2 weeks later, I found a violation notice taped to my mailbox. It accused me of maintaining an unauthorized embankment, creating a public nuisance, and damaging neighborhood property values. The fine was $300 per day after 30 days. I laughed at first, not because it was funny, but because the parcel number printed at the top was not mine. It was a Magnolia Trace lot number created in 2020. My actual county parcel number had existed since 1974. That afternoon, my nearest neighbor, a retired school librarian named Dolores Crane, walked up carrying lemon bread wrapped in foil. She read the notice, lowered her glasses, and said, "Vanessa ran the Carters out last year. She fined them until they could not refinance, then bought their place to her cousin's company." I looked at her. "You are saying this is not about a berm?" "Honey," Dolores said with Vanessa, "nothing is ever about the thing she says it is about." That night I opened the metal file box for my closing, spread the old surveys across Nora's yellow kitchen table, and found something that made the back of my neck go cold. On the Magnolia Trace Amendment filed in 2020, somebody had shifted the subdivision boundary uphill and drawn a clean black line straight across 2 acres of my land. The deed had not changed, the tax record had not changed, and nobody had ever contacted the previous owner. But on that one county map, my property had been quietly swallowed. 3 days later, Vanessa returned with a nervous little man named Clay Dorsey, the HOA vice president, and demanded access for an inspection. I refused. She leaned closer and lowered her voice. "My husband chairs the county land use board, Mr. One Mercer, and he does not appreciate people making his job difficult." There it was, not hidden, not softened, just placed on my porch like a loaded pistol. I smiled, thanked her for clarifying, and closed the door. Then I wrote her husband's name in my notebook. Russell Pike, County Land Use Board, and underlined it twice. The next morning, I mailed the HOA my permits, engineering drawings, drainage calculations, property deed, and license record by certified mail. 6 days later, the entire package came back unopened, marked refused. On the same afternoon, a Greene County envelope arrived, ordering me to remove the berm within 14 days or face a $48,000 lien. I drove straight to see Amos Bell, a former county prosecutor who practiced law above a hardware store and wore cowboy boots polished only on Sundays. He read the county order, then the returned envelope, then the subdivision map. After a long silence, he leaned back and smiled in a way that made me feel almost sorry for Vanessa. "Almost. Calvin," he said, "do not interrupt them now. They have started digging their own grave, and I think we should let them finish it." Amos did not mean grave in the dramatic sense, at least not yet. He meant records, signatures, dates, and the kind of quiet contradictions that make powerful people start sweating in air-conditioned rooms. He told me not to answer the county order until he had seen the complete enforcement file, then slid a legal pad across the desk and asked me to write down every contact I had ever had with Vanessa, Clay, Russell, or anyone connected to Magnolia Trace. I spent the next hour filling 6 pages, including the exact time Vanessa had threatened me on my porch, the day my certified package came back unopened, and the license number of the county truck that had slowed beside my property 2 nights earlier. When I finished, Amos tapped the stack with one finger and said, "Calvin, people like this count on memory being soft. Paper is not soft." The following morning, we filed a public records request for the 2020 subdivision amendment. Every drainage study submitted by Magnolia Trace, every land use vote involving Russell Pike, and every conflict of interest disclosure he had filed since taking office. Amos also sent a formal objection to the county, but he kept it short, just 3 pages, factual, calm, and sharp enough to shave with. He attached my deed, the original parcel map, and proof that the berm had been permitted years before Magnolia Trace existed. Then he copied the state engineering board, the Attorney General's Public Integrity Unit, and the County Ethics Office. Vanessa called me that evening before sunset. I knew it was her because people who think they own your time never bother hiding their number. "You are making a serious mistake, Mr. Mercer," she said. Her voice was smooth, but there was a little tremor underneath it now. I was sitting on the porch shelling peas into one of Nora's old mixing bowls. I told her I had made plenty of serious mistakes in my life, including buying a boat in 1987. But keeping records was not one of them. She ignored that. Russell has relationships in this county. Judges, commissioners, inspectors. You cannot win by embarrassing us. I looked down the hill at the roofs of Magnolia Trace glowing orange in the evening sun. I'm not trying to embarrass you, Vanessa, I said. I'm trying to keep your homes from flooding. She laughed, short and cold. There it is again. The engineer pretending he is the only adult in the room. Remove the berm, and this ends. I let the silence stretch until she filled it herself. You have 7 days. Then she hung up. I wrote the time beside her name and added one sentence beneath it. Direct demand after notice of flood risk. 3 days later, Amos received the first batch of records. 190 pages delivered in a cardboard box that smelled like dust and overheated copier toner. We spread them across his conference table, page by page. The shape of the operation came into focus. The 2020 Platt Amendment had been approved by Russell Pike during a meeting where he had never disclosed that his wife was president of the association benefiting from the expansion. Worse, the drainage report for Magnolia Trace depended on an existing upland diversion ridge located on parcel 7C114, my parcel. The report described my berm as a permanent offsite control feature, even though no easement, maintenance agreement, or permission from the landowner existed. They had built an entire neighborhood around a structure they did not own, then tried to seize the land beneath it after the fact. Amos read the same paragraph twice, removed his glasses, and stared at me. They did not misunderstand your property, Calvin. They used it. I felt something shift in me then. Until that moment, part of me had still wanted to believe Vanessa was simply vain. That this whole thing began because a dirt ridge spoiled her kitchen view. The vanity was only the surface. Russell had approved a subdivision that could not legally meet its own drainage requirements without my land, and Vanessa needed control of the berm to keep that fraud hidden. If I remained outside the HOA, I could expose the missing easement. If they forced my property inside their boundary, they could pretend the structure belonged to the community. The scenic view complaint was not the reason. It was camouflage. The next week, Vanessa held an emergency homeowners meeting at the Magnolia Trace clubhouse. Dolores attended because her sister lived there, and she recorded the meeting from inside her purse. Vanessa stood beneath a banner that read Community First and told nearly 70 residents that I had created an unstable earthen hazard above their homes. She said Russell was working personally with the county to correct years of negligence. Then Clay Dorsey took the microphone and claimed I had threatened to release water into the subdivision if the board did not leave me alone. I had never spoken those words. Not to him, not to anyone. When Dolores brought me the recording, I listened to it in Nora's kitchen with the lights turned low. Vanessa's voice came through the small speaker, confident and practiced, and every few minutes the room erupted in applause. I could picture the faces. Worried parents, retired couples, people who had paid too much for homes built in the wrong place, all being told the old man on the hill was holding a flood over their heads. For the first time, I understood why fear works so well in a neighborhood. It gives people a villain before it gives them facts. My son Eli drove down from Jackson the next morning after seeing one of Vanessa's posts online. He found me in the garage checking battery packs for the security cameras. "Dad," he said, "this is getting ugly. Come stay with me until Amos handles it." I told him leaving would give them access to the property and a story about abandonment. He rubbed both hands over his face, the exact gesture Nora used whenever I became impossible. "You are 61, not bulletproof." I looked at him for a long moment. "No," I said, "but I am documented." He did not laugh. Instead, he helped me mount 4 cameras along the fence and 2 more facing the berm. Before he left, he placed Nora's old red thermos on my workbench. "Mom would tell you to be careful," he said. "Then she would tell you to finish what you started." I carried that thermos every day after that. On the 42nd day, a letter arrived from a law firm in Meridian demanding that I remove the berm within 10 days or face a civil lawsuit for $150,000. Amos read it over lunch, chewing slowly on a pulled pork sandwich. When he finished, he wiped his hands and said, "They are not preparing to sue you. They are preparing to force your compliance before the records investigation catches up." I asked what he wanted me to do. He leaned back and studied me. "Give them exactly what they asked for." I thought he was joking. He was not. Amos explained that as long as I refused, Vanessa could claim I was responsible for maintaining an unsafe condition. If I removed the berm under written protest after clearly warning them of the consequences, the chain of responsibility moved. The idea made sense legally, but it sat wrong in my chest. 46 homes were below that slope. Families lived there. Children slept there. Amos saw it on my face. Calvin, you are not causing the danger. You have warned them. You have offered the engineering. They rejected every safe option because the safe option exposes their fraud. I went home and stood beside the berm until dark. The grass along the crest moved in the warm wind, and for a second I could see Nora kneeling there during our first spring, pressing wildflower seeds into the soil with both thumbs. She had called the berm our ugly guardian. I could almost hear her asking the question I did not want to answer. How far are you willing to go to prove someone else is wrong? The next morning, I wrote 5 separate letters, one for every board member. I explained the hydraulic function of the berm in plain language, estimated the runoff volume during a major storm, identified the lowest homes at risk, and stated that removal would occur only under legal duress. I requested written acknowledgement of responsibility. Every letter was sent certified. Every letter came back refused. That was the moment Amos knew the case was ready. 10 days later, I hired a licensed excavation crew from Pine Creek County. The owner, Everett Sloan, had worked levee repairs after Hurricane Ida and understood exactly what he was being asked to destroy. We installed body cameras, fence cameras, and a water level recorder in the lower swale. Vanessa arrived before the excavator did. She brought a folding chair, a stainless steel tumbler, and Clay Dorsey, who carried a camera as if he were documenting the liberation of France. When the machine started, Vanessa stood and clapped. The first bucket tore through the grass Nora had planted, then lifted a dark load of packed clay into the sunlight. I felt that in my ribs. Everett had looked toward me through the cab glass, giving me one last chance to stop him. I nodded. By noon, half the berm was gone. Dust drifted across the property. Diesel smoke hung in the heat, and Vanessa smiled wider with every pass. At one point, she walked to the fence and shouted, "Maybe now you will understand who controls this valley." I did not answer. I only looked past her toward the southern sky, where a line of clouds had begun building over the pines. That night, after the crew left, I opened the Weather Service app. A tropical system named Iris had turned north in the Gulf, and the forecast for Jasper County had changed from scattered rain to 8 inches in less than 3 hours. I set Nora's red thermos beside the stack of returned warning letters, checked every camera twice, and whispered to the empty kitchen, "I hope they finally listen before the water makes them." The rain started at 3012 the next morning, soft at first, just a steady tapping against the metal roof, the kind of sound Nora used to sleep through with one hand tucked beneath her cheek. By 5, it had turned hard enough to erase the tree line beyond the pasture. I made coffee, filled Nora's red thermos, and opened the camera feeds on the kitchen monitor. Water was already collecting where the berm had stood, moving in thin silver ribbons across the exposed clay, each one following the slope I had mapped weeks earlier. At 6:37, the first emergency alert flashed across my phone. Flash flood warning for Jasper County. Avoid low-lying roads. At 7:10, Eli called from Jackson. "Dad, tell me you are inside." "I am inside, and you are not going down there. Not unless somebody needs help." He exhaled through his nose. "That is not the answer I wanted. It is the only honest one I have." By 8, 5 inches had fallen, and the lower swale was running bank to bank. The cameras showed the runoff crossing my southern fence line exactly where the berm used to redirect it, then pouring into Magnolia Trace through the shallow cut beside Vanessa's house. The first lawn disappeared under brown water at 8:23. At 8:31, a black sedan lifted slightly in a driveway, settled, then floated sideways into the street. That was when I called 911. I gave the dispatcher the subdivision name, the flooded entrance, and the addresses of the 3 lowest homes. I also told her Dolores' sister, Helen, lived alone at number 16 and used a walker. Then I pulled on my raincoat, grabbed 2 life jackets, and headed for the truck. The main road into Magnolia Trace was already underwater, so I took an old timber path that ran along the ridge behind the subdivision. My tires sank to the hubs twice, and the rain hit the windshield so hard the wipers looked decorative. When I reached Helen's backyard, the water was above my knees and rising. I found her standing on a kitchen chair with a cordless phone in one hand and a framed photograph in the other. She looked at me through the glass door and said, "Calvin, I suppose this means the homeowners meeting was wrong." I broke the latch with a tire iron and told her we could discuss parliamentary procedure somewhere drier. I carried her to the truck, then helped a young couple named Marcus and Tessa Lang climb out through a bedroom window with their 4-year-old son between them. By 10, my farmhouse held 9 people, 2 dogs, 1 furious orange cat, and enough wet socks to make the entire living room smell like a high school locker room. Ely arrived just before 11 with blankets, bottled water, and the expression of a man preparing to yell at his father after the emergency ended. He did not yell. He saw Helen wrapped in Nora's quilt, saw the little boy asleep on the couch, and simply put his hand on my shoulder. At 11:18, Vanessa went live on social media from her upstairs balcony. Her hair was soaked, her makeup was running, and the water behind her had reached the bottom step of her staircase. "Calvin Mercer sabotaged this community," she said into the phone. "He removed a flood structure knowing exactly what would happen. He planned this because we tried to enforce the rules. Thousands of people were watching within minutes." Clay stood behind her nodding so hard I thought his neck might require medical attention. Russell was nowhere in sight. I watched for less than a minute, then opened my laptop. I posted the return certified letters, the county removal order, the engineering drawings, the drainage report showing Magnolia Trace depended on my berm, and the video of Vanessa clapping while the excavator tore it apart. I included the recording from the clubhouse where she claimed Russell was personally handling the county process. I wrote one sentence above the files. I warned them in writing, and they refused to read it. Then I closed the laptop and went back to making grilled cheese sandwiches. The post spread faster than Vanessa's accusation. Homeowners began sharing photographs of the refused envelopes, the altered boundary map, and the county order with Russell's office copied at the bottom. Dolores added the audio from the meeting. Everett Sloan uploaded his crew footage, including Vanessa shouting that she controlled the valley. By noon, the local news station had called Amos. By 1, 2 county investigators were on their way. The rain stopped at 1:36, not slowly, but all at once, leaving behind a silence broken only by distant sirens and water moving through places it had never been meant to go. 15 homes had flooded. No one died. That mattered more to me than everything that came next. At sunrise the following morning, Amos drove me down to Magnolia Trace. News vans lined the entrance. Residents stood in mud-streaked clothes beside ruined furniture. Vanessa came out of her house wearing a borrowed raincoat and pointed at me before my boots touched the pavement. "Arrest him," she shouted. "He did this." Sheriff Leonard Cross stepped between us and raised one hand. "Mrs. Pike, every word you say is being recorded, so I strongly suggest you stop improving the case against yourself." She stopped. A state engineering investigator named Miriam Cole reviewed my permits beside the hood of her vehicle. After 10 minutes, she looked up and said, "Mr. Mercer, this structure was fully approved and professionally designed. You removed it only after receiving a written county order." "Yes, ma'am." "And you warned the association of the consequences 5 times. She turned toward Vanessa. "Mrs. Pike, where is your husband?" Russell appeared 20 minutes later in a wrinkled dress shirt, escorted from a county SUV. Amos had uncovered emails showing Russell pressured a deputy inspector to issue the removal order, altered the enforcement file, and concealed the drainage report from the county floodplain office. The state investigator asked him to surrender his phone and accompany her for formal questioning. Vanessa stared as he walked away. And for the first time since I had met her, she had no speech prepared. 3 months later, Russell was charged with abuse of office, falsifying public records, and failing to disclose a financial conflict. The Magnolia Trace boundary amendment was voided. The HOA was dissolved after investigators found that Vanessa had used fines and foreclosure threats to force 3 owners out, then steered the properties toward companies tied to her relatives. The association's insurer paid more than $2 million to the flooded families. Vanessa sold her house before the bank could take it and left the county. I never asked where she went. I rebuilt the berm the following spring. But this time, the homeowners below signed a recorded drainage easement and agreed to a maintenance fund. They paid $1 a year for the protection, and I promised to keep the system working as long as I owned the land. On the day we finished, Illy planted wildflowers along the crest where Nora had once knelt in the dirt. We stood there at sunset, looking over a valley that had finally learned the price of ignoring quiet things. Some people later told me I should have refused to remove the berm no matter what the county ordered. Others said the flood was the only language Vanessa and Russell were ever going to understand. I still do not know which side is completely right. I only know I warned them, documented everything, rescued the people I could, and rebuilt what pride destroyed. So tell me what you would have done. Will you kept fighting the order and risk losing everything? Or complied and let the truth follow gravity? Leave your answer in the comments. Share this story with someone dealing with an out-of-control HOA. And subscribe, because sometimes justice does not arrive in a courtroom first. Sometimes it comes rolling downhill in the rain.